He killed the headlights, leaned back like a judge ready to sentence and said, "Get out, Silvia. You need a lesson." That's how my marriage ended. Not with divorce papers, not with shouting, but with the cold click of a car door handle in the middle of nowhere. Before we continue, if you believe no one deserves to be abandoned in the dark, literal or metaphorical, please subscribe. And tell me in the comments, if it had been you, would you have begged to stay or stepped out like I did? My name is Silvia Andrade, 36, once a respected financial analyst. For 3 years, I've been the carefully curated wife of Daniel Mitchell, hedge fund golden boy and master manipulator. He built his empire on clients' trust and built our marriage on my silence. But I stopped being silent 8 months ago. I had found the second set of books. Hidden accounts. Mysterious transfers. Company money bleeding into offshore shells with cute names like Blue Skies Consulting and Riverside Holdings. At the same time, jewelry disappeared from my dresser, only to show up on the throat of his assistant in Instagram photos. So I started recording. Every belittling remark, every lie about where he was, every careless sentence he thought I'd never use against him. My friend and lawyer, Clara Patel, guided me through each step. She said, if he ever crosses the line from emotional cruelty into something the law can't ignore, we strike. That night he thought he'd found the perfect punishment. After our anniversary dinner, he turned the Mercedes toward the old service road. Remote, empty, the kind of place where you measure sound in crickets. Out, he said, not even shutting off the engine. I stared at him, keeping my phone angled so the recording app caught every syllable. Why? I asked, even though I knew the script. You embarrassed me, he snapped. You called my accountant, questioned me about my money. You forget your place. Maybe a long walk in the dark will remind you who runs things here. I could smell the storm before I felt it, the wet metal scent rolling in from the pines. He wanted me stranded 30+ miles from home, too far for an Uber, too isolated for witnesses. 8 months ago I would have begged. But 8 months ago, I hadn't seen the forged signature he tried to pass off as mine. 8 months ago I still thought marital trust meant something. Okay, I said, unbuckling. He blinked, thrown. Okay. I'll walk. My heels sank into gravel as I stepped out. He rolled down the window, smirk curling like smoke. Call me when you've learned your place. Then the car slid back onto the highway, taillights shrinking until they disappeared completely. I counted to 60. The night pressed close, crickets stitching the silence. Then I pulled my phone out, stopped the recording and opened another app. 2 taps. Upload to cloud. Forward to Clara. Headlights bloomed at the edge of the turnout. Not his. A white sedan, steady, cautious. The driver's window rolled down. Nice shoes, Clara said, holding up a pair of black flats from the passenger seat. Did you get him saying it? Every word, I said, climbing in. My hands shook from adrenaline, not fear. Clara tapped her dashcam, its red light glowing. Perfect. Now we add tonight's stunt to the file. Abandonment, financial abuse, fraud. By morning the judge will have everything. I looked back once at the empty turnout. Daniel thought he'd taught me obedience. In truth, he'd just handed me the last piece of evidence I needed. As the rain finally broke across the windshield, Clara asked, "Ready to beat him home?" I smiled. More than ready. You don't catch a man like Daniel by accident. You build a case like a clock, one gear at a time. And I had been winding that clock for 8 months. It started small. A missing bracelet I later spotted in a photo on Daniel's assistant's wrist. A business trip that matched the dates on a resort charge in Mexico. A $7,200 transfer to an LLC I'd never heard of. When I asked, he chuckled and said, "That's routine tax structuring, darling. Don't worry your pretty head." But I had spent 10 years in financial analysis before he convinced me to quit. I knew the language of numbers. And when numbers lie, they always leave an accent. That was the first seed. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I documented. Every transfer. Every mysterious withdrawal. Every sneer about who manages the money in this family. At first it was scribbles in a notebook I hid under old linens. Then Clara handed me a flash drive and said, "We need this admissible. Time-stamped. Organized." So I built folders. Accounts, receipts, trips, recordings. Each one fattened like a goose. Daniel never noticed the new security system I insisted we install. The cameras weren't for burglars. They were for him. And when he brought her into my home on a Tuesday afternoon while I was supposedly at yoga, the lens above the mantel caught everything. Clara wasn't my only ally. Valeria, a forensic accountant, had been reviewing his hedge fund ledgers. She flagged patterns. Money bled from client portfolios into shell companies. Fraud, plain and simple. Marcus, my brother, handled the technical side. Securing devices, backing up files, planting hidden audio recorders where Daniel ranted most. Every month we met in Clara's office after hours, lights dimmed, blinds closed. They laid the evidence out like a chessboard, piece by piece. Abandonment, Clara said once, tapping her pen. If he ever tries to physically strand you, that's gold. Judges despise it. It shows intent to harm. I remember nodding, thinking Daniel would never risk that. I underestimated his arrogance. The more I dug, the clearer the picture became. 3 shell companies. At least 2 offshore accounts in the Caymans. Jewelry insured as lost, but later found in selfies with his mistress. A forged signature on a credit line application. My name, my handwriting style, but not my hand. It wasn't just betrayal. It was embezzlement, insurance fraud, financial abuse. He wasn't just cheating on me, he was preparing to erase me. The night at Morton's Steakhouse, our anniversary, wasn't the first time he humiliated me in public, but it was the first time I felt calm, detached. Watching him toast to many more years, while I knew about his second set of books, made the performance surreal. And then in the car afterward, when I dared ask about the missing $10,000, he finally escalated to cruelty made flesh. Get out, Silvia. Walk home. He thought it was punishment. I knew it was confirmation. Claire had been right all along. So when Claire picked me up from that deserted turnout, shoes in hand, the rain painting us both into a new chapter, I wasn't just relieved. I was satisfied. Because abandonment hadn't broken me. It had completed the file. The missing piece of the puzzle. The final nail. And as the wipers beat against the windshield, I thought, tomorrow Daniel will wake up believing I'm broken. Instead, he'll wake up to frozen accounts, emergency motions, and federal eyes on his fraudulent empire. I smiled then, my first genuine smile in months. Not for revenge, not for justice. For freedom. He thought he'd left me stranded in the dark. But when Daniel walked through our front door, I was already there, waiting with my lawyer and the evidence that would ruin him. The storm broke fully as Clara's sedan slid through the back streets. We didn't take the freeway, too visible. Instead, Clara guided us along old service lanes and neighborhood cut-throughs, the ones only locals use. The rain drummed on the windshield, each drop a gavel stroke. You realize, Clara said, eyes steady on the slick road, when he gets home he'll expect you to be gone. Or broken. Probably both. I pressed the folder in my lap tighter. That's the beauty of it. For once he'll be the one caught off guard. In my mind I replayed Daniel's words. Call me when you've learned your place. He didn't realize that my place wasn't in his passenger seat anymore. It was at the head of the table with proof stacked high. We pulled up 2 streets behind ours, headlights off. From there we walked through the rain, slipping in through the side gate I'd oiled weeks before. My heels were long gone. The flats Clara gave me slapped quietly against the flagstone. The kitchen door recognized my fingerprint. One soft beep, then the lock clicked. Inside, the house was silent, sterile like the stage it had always been. We moved quickly. Clara spread the documents across the marble island. Bank transfers, photos of Daniel with his mistress, the forged credit line, tonight's fresh audio recording. She laid them out like weapons polished for battle. Lights? She asked. Just one, I said. I switched on a lamp in the corner, casting a warm pool that reached the front hall but left the rest in shadow. A stage light for the truth. Claire checked her watch. 15 minutes, maybe 20. He'll pour himself a drink first, text her second, then come here expecting you to crawl back. I sat on the edge of the counter stool, hair damp, clothes clinging. I looked every bit the abandoned wife. But my eyes were steady. My voice was ready. On the island, the recording app glowed red. We weren't done collecting evidence. Tonight, I wanted his reaction documented too. The moment he realized he'd lost control. At last, headlights swept across the front windows. Tires crunched the driveway gravel. The storm applauded on the roof. Keys rattled. The front lock turned. Silvia. His voice carried that practiced blend of annoyance and fake concern. Where are you? I didn't answer. I waited. Clara stayed still beside the island, her hand resting on the thickest folder labeled Exhibit A. Then he stepped into the hall, shaking raindrops from his jacket. He froze when he saw me sitting in the light. You? His eyes darted from me to Clara to the neat stacks of paper. How are you here already? I let the silence hang, then said softly. You left me in the storm, Daniel. And I still beat you home. Clara closed her briefcase with a sharp click. Mr. Mitchell, I'm attorney Clara Patel. I represent Silvia in forthcoming legal proceedings. Daniel's mouth opened, closed. He laughed once, short and brittle. Proceedings? What is this, some stunt? Silvia, tell me this is a joke. I pushed the first folder toward him. Transfers. Offshore accounts. His signature sloppy under pressure. His face drained of color. Where did you get these? You gave them to me, I said. Every careless transaction. Every insult I recorded. Every lie you told that I filed away. You built this case yourself. I just gathered it. The storm rattled the windows. Daniel stood dripping in the hall, trapped between denial and panic. Clara adjusted her glasses, steady as stone. And I, barefoot, damp, unbroken, finally felt the balance shift. He thought he'd stranded me. Instead, he'd delivered me home first, armed and waiting. This was only the beginning. He wanted me drenched, broken, crawling back. Instead, he came home to find me dry-eyed, with my lawyer beside me and the storm pounding like a gavel at his trial. Daniel's jaw tightened as his eyes darted from Clara's folders to me. His tie hung loose, his face pale from shock. Silvia, he said, voice low but vibrating with anger. What game are you playing? I slid the first page across the marble island. A wire transfer of $75,000 to Blue Skies Consulting LLC, an entity that existed only on paper. You recognize this, don't you? I asked. His throat bobbed. Business expense. Claire didn't flinch. We've already verified it with the bank. And the IRS will see it in the morning. I pulled another document from the stack. A Marceline's receipt for a pearl choker. $12,000. You reported my grandmother's necklace stolen. Insurance cut you a check. Then you bought this. For her. I tapped the glossy print of Daniel's assistant, grinning in a mirror selfie, pearls glittering at her throat. Daniel's voice rose. That's irrelevant. You don't understand how these things work. On the contrary, Clara said, placing another file down. Silvia understands perfectly. You've committed fraud, misappropriation of marital assets, and embezzlement of client funds. I took my phone and pressed play. Daniel's own voice filled the kitchen, cold and commanding. Out. You need a lesson. Walking home might remind you who manages the money in this family. Call me when you've learned your place. The blood drained from his face. You were recording? I've been recording for months, I said. You taught me well, Daniel. Actions have consequences. He slammed his fist against the counter, rattling the crystal glasses. You ungrateful, after everything I've given you. Clara stepped forward, her voice calm but sharp as steel. Careful, Mr. Mitchell. This is still recording. Every word you say tonight will go before a judge. He turned to me, eyes blazing. You think you'll ruin me with paperwork? With some audio clip? Silvia, you don't know who you're dealing with. I stood slowly, meeting his height. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A man who thought leaving his wife stranded in the dark was discipline. A man who built his empire on lies. And tonight, Daniel, you're out of time. As if on cue, red and blue lights washed across the rain-streaked windows. A firm knock rattled the front door. Mr. Daniel Mitchell? A voice called. Police. Open up. Daniel froze, every ounce of arrogance collapsing into disbelief. You called the police? He whispered. Clara folded her arms. No, Mr. Mitchell. We reported the fraud weeks ago. Tonight just gave them the final piece. The pounding grew louder. Daniel's hands shook as he tried to gather the scattered papers, but Clara slid them back into her folder. Evidence stays with us, she said. I watched his chest heave, his perfect mask shattered. The man who thought he controlled every narrative now looked like a cornered animal. Open the door, Daniel, I said softly. Or they'll break it down. His hand hovered over the knob, rain thundering outside, sirens wailing in the distance. For the first time in years, the silence between us belonged to me. He left me on the roadside to prove I was powerless. Weeks later, I stood in a courtroom with his empire crumbling around him, and for once he was the one stranded with no way home. The marble corridors smelled faintly of polish and fear. Reporters whispered as I passed, their cameras flashing. But this time the headlines weren't mine to fear, they were Daniel's. Clara walked beside me, her heels striking the floor with the rhythm of certainty. In her arms, a briefcase heavy with files, recordings, and receipts. Behind us, Marcus carried an additional box of evidence, his jaw clenched with satisfaction. When the bailiff called, "All rise," my pulse quickened but my feet stayed steady. Judge Ramirez entered, robes sweeping the floor, eyes sharp and tired of liars. "Mrs. Andrade," the judge said, "you may begin." Clara rose first, voice calm but slicing. "Your Honor, what we present today is not merely a marital dispute. It is a case of financial abuse, fraud, and deliberate endangerment." One by one she laid the exhibits out like dominoes. The wire transfers to shell companies. The receipts for jewelry and vacations, all billed to joint accounts. The surveillance photos of Daniel bringing his mistress into my home. And finally the recording of that night. The courtroom speakers filled with Daniel's voice. "Out. You need a lesson. Walking home might remind you who manages the money in this family. Call me when you've learned your place." Every word echoed against the wood-paneled walls. Daniel's head dropped. His attorney leapt to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. These are isolated incidents, exaggerated by a vindictive spouse." Judge Ramirez arched a brow. "Exaggerated? Did your client or did he not abandon his wife at night miles from home?" Daniel stood, tie trembling under his fingers. I left her, but it wasn't." "Yes or no, Mr. Mitchell?" the judge cut in. "Yes," he whispered. The courtroom buzzed. When it was my turn, I rose slowly, the weight of months sliding off my shoulders. "I was humiliated, silenced, and controlled," I said. "But I documented everything. I didn't fight back with anger. I fought back with truth. Daniel Mitchell didn't just betray me as a husband. He betrayed his clients, his vows, and the law. And if I hadn't stood up tonight, he would have kept going." Clara squeezed my arm. The judge nodded once, gravely. Judge Ramirez leaned forward. "Mr. Mitchell, this court finds credible evidence of fraud, financial abuse, and abandonment. Effective immediately. All marital assets are frozen. Mrs. Andrade is granted exclusive occupancy of the marital home. Temporary support of $15,000 per month is ordered. And this court refers your financial conduct to the district attorney for criminal review." Daniel's face twisted. He slammed his palm against the table. "This is insane. She set me up." The gavel cracked like thunder. "Enough. Sit down before I hold you in contempt." As the bailiff guided us out, Daniel's eyes locked on mine, full of rage and disbelief. He had wanted me small, voiceless, stranded. Instead he was the one shackled by his own words, his own arrogance. For the first time in years I walked out of a courtroom not as his shadow, but as myself. He thought the storm would break me. But storms don't just destroy, they also clear the air. And when the rain stopped, I finally saw the horizon that had always been mine. The gavel's echo still rang in my ears as Daniel was escorted out of the courtroom, his shoulders hunched, his mask shattered. The man who once strutted through marble lobbies and ordered $500 bottles of wine was now reduced to a defendant under investigation. I didn't celebrate, not yet. Revenge wasn't champagne and fireworks. It was quieter than that. It was walking back into my home without fear. The first night alone, I moved through each room with deliberate calm. I opened drawers he had locked, closets he had commandeered, files he had hidden. Every discovery felt like peeling away a layer of his control. On the kitchen island where he used to toss his cufflinks like trophies, I placed something else. My own name on fresh legal documents. For the first time the house was mine. With Clara's guidance I began the process of starting over. Not just financially but emotionally. I reconnected with former colleagues who remembered the sharp analyst I used to be. I reopened my portfolio of work, projects Daniel once mocked as hobbies. And slowly I began advising women in situations like mine, showing them how to trace the numbers, how to collect the proof, how to fight back with facts instead of fear. One of them asked me, How did you stay so calm when he left you out there that night? I smiled. Because I wasn't stranded. I already had a way home. News traveled fast. Clients pulled their investments. His hedge fund collapsed within weeks. His mistress, faced with subpoenas and scrutiny, turned on him. Even his own family, who once praised his brilliance, fell silent. The man who prided himself on control lost everything he'd built. And it wasn't because I screamed or begged or fought recklessly. It was because I documented, I planned, I waited. Months later, on a rainy evening much like the one he left me in, I stood by the window of my own office. Not his, not ours. Mine. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the wet pavement. Inside, my desk was cluttered with case files of women I was helping. Each folder was a life taking back its shape. Clara walked in, a rare smile softening her sharp features. Full circle, she said, setting down 2 mugs of tea. Not full circle, I corrected. Forward. Daniel had wanted me broken, stranded, erased. But storms don't erase, they reveal. That night in the rain, he thought he was teaching me a lesson about obedience. Instead, I taught him the only lesson that mattered. No one gets to decide my place. Because my place was never on the roadside. It was here, stronger, freer, and finally home.